Hi, everyone. I'm Robbie Wells with Music.com. Thanks for joining us today for this virtual discussion. I want to say thank you to NAMM, the attendees of NAMM, Sony for enabling this conversation to happen in the first place, not only by providing the outlet in the forum, but providing the inspiration and the software at the center of it all. I mentioned Music.com. I'm the co-founder of Music.com, and we are honored and humbled to be a partner with Sony in the ecosystem that's ultimately going to fuel the adoption of this amazing new technology, 360 reality audio. I'll speak more about our role in a second, but let's talk about today's conversation. I was fortunate this week to be able to have sat down with a few individuals, a few creators, artists, producers, engineers, that have spent more time working with 360 reality audio than probably anyone else on the planet. They were part of the team that have had beta versions of it, that have been creating lots of mixes for some of today's biggest artists, and we consider them architects. They are pioneers. They are some of the first to use this, and we're excited to get their perspective. We call today's conversation, "What is 360 reality audio?" We jokingly or affectionately refer to it as WTF is 360 reality audio, only because it's so game changer and so groundbreaking. It doesn't absolutely make sense the first time you hear about it. So these folks today are going to help break it down even further as to what it is. And we're excited because if we were doing this in the 1930s, it would be called WTF is stereo. That's how game changer this new technology is, the opportunity is. And these guys are going to break it down for us. So thank you once again to Sony, to NAMM, for all of you that are going to sit through this conversation. It will be, I promise it will be insightful and enlightening, and look forward to hearing more from you. And just on one note, we're doing this because we're on a mission. We're on a mission to effectively find more of these architects, more people like you're about to hear from today. The software is now available. You can go download the software. We want you to go experiment with it. We want you to make music with it. We want you to then come to music.com and share it with us. Share that music. You'll share the story behind it. And we're looking to find the first wave. I kind of jokingly refer to it as our pro team. So experiment with that software. Go to music.com/architects. Start sharing your music with us. Start sharing the story behind it. And it will also help you get it distributed to all the streaming services that currently offer 360 RA. So excited to hear from you, excited to learn more about you. Go get that software, visit us at music.com/architects. And now here's the conversation with some of the first. So thank you very much.
So I want to do a quick round of introductions just to let everyone know who we have here. So first up, we have Mike Piacentini. Mike, you want to say hi real quick?
Hey. What's going on, everybody?
All right, wonderful. So Mike is a mastering engineer who works out at Sony Music's Battery Studios in New York City. And I think just by proximity, he's done lots of amazing work in his career, but he's probably actually holds the distinguished honor of having done more 360 RA mixing than probably anyone on the planet. So he's had the opportunity to go back into the catalog of Sony and do a lot of 360 mixing. He's working on new stuff at any point in time as well, new projects that are coming out. So there's probably not one person who's spent more time with their hands in the software and thinking conceptually about 360 reality audio than Mike P. So Mike, thank you for joining. Next up, we have Mike Larson. So Mike Larson, I get to say, is a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and just an all-around awesome guy. But he also has spent a lot of time working with 360 reality audio simply because he is the long time engineer for Pharrell Williams. So if Pharrell is near any kind of recording equipment, a microphone or a keyboard, you will probably see Mike very close by. Pharrell had the opportunity at a very early stage in the development of 360 reality audio to experience it. And by association, Mike got a chance to get his hands on it and work with it, and he's mixed some of Pharrell's biggest hits in 360 reality audio, and has just taken to the software and is doing some incredible stuff. If you need the stems for Happy, he has them. Just ask him; he'll send them to you.
Just joking.
We're super happy to have him here today. Grammy award winning engineer. He's had his hands on everything, like I said, from Happy to Get Lucky and literally anything, probably every single project that Pharrell's released in the last 15 to 20 years. So Mike, thank you for joining. Next up, we have Breezy. And Breezy is in my opinion, yeah, say hi, Breezy. In my opinion, the embodiment of the type of creative that Sony and this collective team is so excited to have experiment and start working with in 360 Reality Audio. Not only is she self-taught, DIY, do it yourself, do it all yourself, individual, also a bit of a fan of innovation, a fan of technology, and a fan of just anything that can take things to the next level. She herself is a very accomplished musician, and however, also happens to play one on TV, which is interesting. And it has the chance to make music for the television shows that she's been a part of, both Empire and All American. So Breezy, super excited to have you here. Excited to know that you have projects in the works that will be mixed in 360 RA, and look forward to hearing your perspective on some of this stuff. And then we have Toft Willingham. So, it wasn't too long ago, Breezy was actually in the music.com studios. A friend of hers was in there recording, and Breezy, that was Breezy's initial exposure to 360 RA and even the potential of it. But the person who sits in that studio all day long is Toft Willingham. So Toft, say hi.
What's up?
Um, so Toft is himself an accomplished composer, producer, writer, artist, and we're very excited to have him effectively the guy behind the boards at the music.com studio most of the time. So music.com studio is equipped for 360 RA mixing. We do have an array of speakers that enable you to listen to 360 RA outside of the headphones, even though most people, when they experience 360 RA, will be within headphones. It's a unique experience, but if you find yourself there, you'll probably find yourself working with Toft, and we're excited to have him here because just by, once again, most of us on this phone, our experience with 360 RA is simply based on interesting proximity and the universe at work has brought us to 360, and now here I am sitting with the people who have more experience with it than anyone, and it's about to be unleashed to a large amount of people. So I need to stop talking so I can let these folks talk. I think I'll start off by throwing a question I'll start with Mike P, and then I'll let Mike Larson weigh in as well, because I know Mike P has a vast amount of experience, but I was kind of there at times with Mike Larson's initial experience with 360 RA. So what I'd love to hear from you, Mike P, first is just what was your initial experience hearing it as an engineer, hearing 360 Reality Audio, and how did that transition into your early kind of endeavors in mixing with it?
Sure. So the first time I heard 360, it must have been almost 2.5 years ago at this point. It was like a real early, like, I wouldn't even call it beta at that point yet, but it was like, they had Architect, which was their software at the time that was being used to create these mixes, and it was a very bare bones DAW at that point. It was, there was pretty much only panning automation in this thing at this point, but they played I think it was a Beach Boys track, and that some engineer over in Tokyo had mixed just using the beta software, and they played it over 13, 14 speakers with a sub, and in a big control room where everything was set up and calibrated properly, and you're like, wow, it sounds amazing. And you're like, okay, no one has 15 speakers in their house, so how is this gonna translate to what everybody else can hear? And then they put some microphones in my ear, and I'm a little this is weird, but okay, let's see what happens. And so they calibrate your ears with a bunch of sine wave impulse responses from every speaker in the room, and that created some sort of like I guess phase response map for the individual. And then from there, they put headphones on, and I was sitting there and I was taking the headphones off and putting them back on. I'm like, wow, can't hear much of a difference. And from that, I was like, okay, let's start mixing in this format, because this definitely has potential. And then over the course of the next 2 years or so, I've definitely got my hands in mixing a lot of these albums, and it was exciting to watch the technology grow into the point where they're about to release it now.
Yeah, amazing. Mike, how about you? Hearing it and working with it?
Yeah, so the first time I experienced 360 audio was at the Live Nation Studios in Hollywood. I was I was connected via Robbie through or to some of the guys from the Sony Pro Audio department out of Tokyo, and I ended up going to the studio there and met with Hiro Komura, who's one of the lead developers behind the software, and kind of had a pretty similar experience to what Mike said. The engineer there, this gentleman named Didi, was working on a mix of a live concert. I forget what group it was, but I kind of came in. He was in the middle of mixing, and I just kind of sat and just listened for a little while, and really could the directionality of the sound was incredible to hear right off the bat. The way that he had it mixed, he had the crowd kind of encircling the listener in the middle of the room, and you could really pinpoint sort of like the on-stage direction of, okay, the drums are sort of in the middle there, but the guitar player's off to the side and the bass player's on the other side, and it was a really cool experience. We did the same thing as far as measuring the hearing profile of the listener, and did the headphone test as well, and did the same thing. Was like taking the headphones on and off to be like, this sounds like the speakers, but it's actually coming out of the headphones, which I thought was genius, because this is like the one thing that'll even the playing field for any listener. You don't need a complicated speaker setup at home. You don't need 15 speakers. All you need is a good pair of headphones, and you can experience this version of an audio track or concert in the comfort of your own home or wherever you might be at. Really cool stuff.
Anyway, I'm going to read just real quick Sony's official kind of description of it. It's, create immersive music without limits. 360 Reality Audio is a new immersive music experience using Sony's spatial sound technologies. Dynamically place and control individual sounds in a 360 spherical sound field and immerse listeners in sound from all around. So after hearing something like that, Breezy, this is for you. Your experience working with music, your experience mixing, or making, creating, producing your own music, when you hear that that's now a possibility, like, does it fly over your head? Like, oh, I got to dig in. Does it make sense? Because this is something as Sony's trying to drive adoption of it, I think they're always going to need to be working on how to effectively communicate it. But when you hear something like that, Breezy, like, what are your thoughts on the possibilities?
I don't think it went over my head at all. I think my first time hearing about it, and it being explained to me, and Sony, by the way, explained it perfectly in that little insert you just read. But I think as creatives and as engineers and people who sit behind the board, I think we always hear music in a certain way. Like, we always hear it, not even like without even really hearing it, and I'm one of them people that I've always wanted to sit inside of a record. I want to sit inside of it, like I'm in a bubble, you know what I mean? And I feel like 360 does that for me. Like, it's brought to life what I've always heard, but I didn't really hear, you know what I mean? So you might think like, oh, I'm crazy. Like, what is that? But if I could place individual sounds and vocals all around myself and where my ears sit, that would be 360. You get what I'm saying? So for me, it was kind of like, oh shit, this is it. You know what I'm saying? And my first time hearing it, I was like, wow. And like Mike was saying, with the setup and all the speakers, it was kind of like, okay, but how do you normalize that? You know what I'm saying? Because nobody's having all those speakers unless you know, are in the position of some of us and able to experience that, but most people probably won't, you know. But I think they executed very well, even in the headphone state. Chris gave me headphones, and I was able to go and listen to a few different things in that 360 and still having the same sound minus the million speakers that are involved in that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you a question, a follow-up to that. Like, in your mind, upon hearing it and experiencing it, does it actually influence the song writing process, right? Does it make you say, now that I know this is available, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to intentionally create a sound that I'm going to put back here? Or do you think that's something that just will come with time after people get more used to the software? Because to me, I've always wondered, will it impact the creativity at the beginning or at the end of the process?
I think it absolutely will. It just depends on, you know, how well you're tapped into the different directions, you know, of where sound could be when you're listening. For me, I'm one of those people. I kind of, and because I'm an artist and I, you know, record and do everything myself, I'm like I mix as I go along. So I might again hear something, and for me, it definitely will. I'll be like, oh, let's bring that in over here. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. I think, but for the most part, you know, it just depends on how well your ears are acclimated with that 360 sound.
So, question for you, Toft. I know you obviously work across music, but also work across television as well, and motion pictures, etc. But in your case, like when you first started working with it, what were your thoughts just on the possibilities? What were your thoughts on like where this is going to go or where it could go, and even maybe a little bit of what it initially attracted you to it?
Well, at first when I encountered the software, I was at music.com studios, and I sat down and put the headphones on and pulled up the first little demo that they have. And it was just simply a subject talking and saying where her location was, upper, rear, all these things. And immediately I was like, whoa, this is something special. So my thoughts gravitated immediately to film or television, and having, you know, obviously we all know about 5.1 and that software, and having that in your home and having those kind of systems in your home, and they're pretty regular, but there's so much content being viewed on your phone at this point. So now what 360 could allow us to do is take film music or television music, have it on your phone, and create that 360 environment that we're getting at home. And even more so because it's not just directional speakers, it's actually a 360 sphere above and below you. So immediately that's where my brain went when I heard the software. But then I had the experience of going on Tidal and hearing some of Mike's mixes and some of the other mixes that have been put out there. And I saw the application in music, and just comparing a stereo mix to a 360 mix, you immediately hear the spatial difference. It's a whole new experience, and the audiophile in me got really excited about that. And then in using it, I think the thing that really stands out to me the most is when we're mixing, we're always carving out space for things. That's how we do it. You know, we're allowing the instrument to sit in its frequency range comfortably, and in our left-right panning historically. And now all of a sudden we have all this space, so we can have this richness in these instruments that we couldn't have in stereo, and we can then place them around us. So what I'm interested to see is how the creatives who have 360 in mind from the inception of the music, how they're going to really take advantage of it. Because I think that has yet to happen, and it's just kind of now starting to happen. Like we did a project with Keith Harris from Black Eyed Peas, and I think he was the first person who said, okay, I'm creating a piece strictly with this in mind, or one of the first. It was like, I'm going to compose with this software as my focus. And I'd like to see these architects, these new people that come on, really take advantage of that and immerse themselves in it from the ground up, you know?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you wouldn't listen to music on Tidal. If you, and this is a question for everyone, and it's twofold because I know some people have deeper histories listening to music in 360 RA. So question for each of you, and I'll start with Mike P. What is if you were going to send one of these future architects to a streaming service, let's just use Tidal as an example, to listen to a song, what song would you tell them to listen to that you think is just mind-blowing, as an example? And then second question, like if there was a song just from your own kind of personal love, your own personal love, like that you would love to see mixed in 360 that you haven't heard mixed in 360, and I'll throw that to everybody. So yeah, let's start with you, Mike P.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Toft and Breezy kind of touched on it the best in that, like, you know, in this new format, you really want to like carve out space, right? And like, you don't have to do that anymore so much because, you know, you have all this like, you know, vertical integration going on, and you can pan further than 180 degrees behind you. And so a lot of the stuff we've been doing, you know, you don't have to like carve out stuff as much. And so I think a lot of the songs that I've worked on that I think lend themselves the best to this format are the ones with a lot of like individual elements, right? Because you get, you know, all these, when you're producing like frontline tracks and mixing frontline stuff, you have like all these synth layers, and like, you know, you throw in all these little sparkle elements like, you know, snaps and claps and you know, things like that. And you can really make them stand out in this format. And you know, I think a lot of the stuff that has a lot of those elements, like I just, you know, I finished up the new Zayn record. That one really had a lot of interesting synth layers. You know, the K-pop record that I flew to LA to do, Monster X, I think really lent itself to a lot of that stuff. There's you know, track I did, that one has a ton of elements in it that like you don't really hear in the stereo mix, but when you know, separate stuff out for 360, it's like, oh shit, there's that thing that like was buried in the mix, but it's like back there now. So there's a lot of stuff like that I think you know, definitely differentiates the product from the stereo version of the mix. And you know, moving forward, I you know, there's always artists that are like near and dear to my heart, but like, you know, we started to really work on a big portion of the catalog and really dig in. And you know, some of the stuff we've been going after had, you know, stem mixes created for things like Rock Band and stuff like that in the past, and we've sort of like reutilized those and repurposed them for this. You know, a lot of like, you know, a lot of like older progressive rock is kind of cool in this format if you can get the stems on those. You know, we're working on some of the catalog, some of the stuff that's going to be real interesting when we can, you know, mix those properly to be beneficial in this format. I'm really stoked. We got a Paul Oakenfold record coming up that I'm working on with Chris, and that one I think is going to be absolutely killer in this format because there's just so much instrumentation going on. Yeah, that's a general, you know, what I'm looking forward to the most, I think.
Excellent. What about you, Larson?
I think one of the other first mixes I heard, I forget I think it might have been a Herbie Hancock mix that I actually heard at CES last year. They had sort of this like little demo station set up in the festival hall where you could go and throw on some headphones, and they actually had an app that would sort of, it wasn't as accurate as putting the microphone in your ear to measure your hearing response, but they invented this app that would take a picture of your ear and do sort of the same thing, and then you would go ahead and listen to the mix. So that was pretty awesome as well to hear kind of somebody else's take on that record and in their view of a 360 mix. And then something I would love to hear done in the future would be Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles album. I remember when I was when I was a young kid listening to that. My parents had the actual vinyl, the stereo version on vinyl, which I became obsessed with. And I noticed one day that certain instruments were only like on one side. Like in some of those records, you have like the drums and the bass completely on the left channel, and then the vocals and like the piano were on the right side. And I thought that was interesting. That was like one of the first albums where it was originally done in mono, and then later on they did stereo mixes of all the records as well. And they really took a lot of creative liberties with like, we wouldn't even think of doing that today in today's like, pop music market of having the drums only on the left side. Like that seems counterintuitive, to kind of what we're used to. But I think a reimagining of that album in 360 RA could be incredible. So it's so rich, musically, and tons of different textures and musical ideas there. It'd be really fun to mess around with, I think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we inspire the next Sergeant Pepper.
Absolutely.
Just based on the ability to do that, because it was probably what they were thinking when they made it. Who knows? Breezy, what about you? I know you're in an interesting situation where you have an album that's near or very close to complete, that's going to get the full 360 treatment. Is there a particular song on that album you're excited about that people should keep an eye out for when it comes, that you're thinking about, that you can reveal?
Yeah, I have a record on there called 1942, and I'm super interested to hear that mix in 360. And that's just because, like Mike was saying, like, it has so many layers to it, So now, instead of just the left right panning, and like our space was very very limited as to where we can go with sound, but now that we have all this headspace, we got lower space, we have just a full 360 of space for sound. I just I'm just excited to hear, how the record comes to life, because I think it gains a new life coming into 360. I also think 360, if we bring records in that space, whether they're old or new, we'll also be able to determine if this record is trash or not. You get what I'm saying? Because if you think about it, in a 360 space, naturally we're only listening for that left right, you know what I mean? So it's a very confined space, and once you get a record in that little teeny space with nothing above, nothing beyond, it might be like, well, damn, this shit is not even that good. You might have to go back and mess with some records, because I don't know. I just think as everybody was talking, I was like, well, this might be the test. Like, is this a hit? Let's play it in 360. No, it's not.
Yep. No, I think that's amazing insight. And just to wrap this up, I know we've said it a few times, right? That we're excited to start meeting artists and producers, engineers, et cetera, that are working with 360 RA. We want to hear what you do with it once you start using it. And in order for us to hear that, bring it to music.com/architects. There you'll see all the instructions on what to do, but mainly we want to hear what you make, and we want to hear the process behind it. So we need you out there making the music. We need you out there talking about it. We want to hear what your thoughts are on it. So bring it back to music.com/architect. And all that said, I want to thank this panel. Thank you so much on the West Coast for getting up early. It's been a fun journey. So, over the last, in my case, about 18 months. Mike's journey's longer. Mike Larson's is about the same as mine. And Toft, you're relatively new to the mix, and as well as Bree. But looking forward to continuing the journey with all of you. Like you were kind of there. Imagine being at the forefront of stereo, how weird that would have been, right? Like you're kind of potentially in that same place right now. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for tuning in.